Hey. Welcome to Reddit Story Dose. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, because today's stories? Absolutely unreal. We've got 5 stories from horror and moral_dilemma. Let's jump in. From R, no sleep. I'm a 911 dispatcher. One call has haunted me for 15 years. I was a 911 dispatcher for 11 years. Most calls are routine. Car accidents, chest pains, domestic disputes. You develop a rhythm. You stay calm. You follow the protocol. You learn to detach your emotions from the voice on the other end of the line, because if you don't, the job will eat you alive within the first 6 months. But one call broke me. 15 years later, I still think about it every day. I'll be doing something completely mundane, pouring coffee, walking the dog, lying in bed waiting for sleep, and it comes back. Not as a memory, as a feeling. Like something cold pressing against the back of my neck. It was 3:17 in the morning on a Wednesday in late October. The kind of night where the air is heavy and still, and the silence outside feels deliberate. My shift had been quiet. 2 noise complaints, a fender bender on Route 9, and an elderly man who called because he couldn't find his cat. I was halfway through a crossword puzzle when the line lit up. A woman called from a rural address about 30 minutes outside the city. One of those properties where your nearest neighbor is a quarter-mile away and the roads don't have streetlights. I answered with my standard greeting. 911, what is your emergency? Her voice was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that doesn't come from composure. It comes from something inside you shutting down. There is someone standing in my backyard, she said. No panic, no tremor. She could have been reading a grocery list. Okay, ma'am, can you describe what you're seeing? I asked, already typing the address into the system. It's a person, she said. Standing at the edge of the tree line. Facing my house. She paused, not moving, just standing. I asked if she could make out any features. Height, clothing, anything. She said no. It was too dark, and the figure was too far from the porch light. Just a shape, a silhouette against the trees. I dispatched a unit and stayed on the line. Standard procedure. I told her to stay inside, keep the doors locked, and stay away from the windows. She said okay, but her tone didn't change. There was no relief in it. No urgency. Nothing. Then she said something that changed the call. Changed everything. It has been there for 3 hours. I have been watching it since midnight. I stopped typing. My fingers just froze over the keyboard. I looked at the clock on my screen. 3:17 a.m. She had been watching something, stand motionless in her backyard for 3 hours before calling. Ma'am, I said, keeping my voice steady, why did you wait so long to call? She was quiet for a moment. I could hear her breathing. Slow, measured, like she was choosing each word carefully. Because for the first 2 hours, she said, I thought it was a tree. I felt something crawl up my spine. Not fear exactly. Something worse. The feeling you get when something doesn't fit, when your brain is trying to process information that doesn't belong in the world as you understand it. A tree doesn't become a person. A person doesn't stand perfectly still for 3 hours in someone's backyard in the middle of the night. But then it moved? I asked. No, she said. It never moved. I just realized there was never a tree there before. I didn't know what to say to that. I just told her help was on the way and asked her to stay on the line. She said okay. Then silence. I could hear the house around her. The faint hum of a refrigerator, maybe the ticking of a clock. No wind. No crickets. Just that dead rural silence that city people never understand. The responding officer arrived 19 minutes later. 19 minutes is a long time when you're sitting in the dark watching something that shouldn't be there. I stayed on the line the entire time, and she barely spoke. Every few minutes I'd say, ma'am, are you still there? And she'd say, yes. Nothing more. The officer, his name was Dominguez, I remember that, checked the backyard with his flashlight and radioed back. Dispatch, I've got nothing out here. No one present. No footprints in the soil. No disturbance to the vegetation. The tree line is approximately 40 feet from the residence. His voice was bored. Routine call. Probably a shadow, maybe a deer. I relayed this to the woman. Ma'am, the officer isn't finding anyone in the yard. It's possible that, she screamed. Not a startled scream. Not a gasp or a yelp. A scream of pure, absolute terror. The kind of sound that comes from somewhere deeper than the throat. It was raw and ragged, and it hit a pitch that made me physically pull my headset away from my ear. In 11 years on the job, I had heard people scream while being attacked, scream while watching loved ones die, scream during the worst moments of their lives. This was different. This was the sound of someone seeing something that the human mind was not built to process. Then the line went dead. I tried to reconnect. Nothing. I radioed Dominguez immediately. Unit 7, do you copy? I've lost contact with the caller. His response came quick, his voice no longer bored. Copy, dispatch. I heard the scream from inside the house. I'm going in. He entered through the back door, which was unlocked. I sat in my chair, headset on, staring at my screen, waiting. The dispatch center was quiet around me. My coworker at the next station had stopped what she was doing and was looking at me. She could see it on my face. Dominguez radioed back 2 minutes later. His voice had changed. It was careful now. Controlled, the way you speak when you're trying not to let something shake you. I found the caller in the bedroom, he said. She's sitting upright in bed. Eyes wide open. She's not responding. Not to my voice, not to my light. She's breathing, but I don't know. She's just gone. She was transported to the hospital. Catatonic state was the official description. She never spoke about what she saw. Not to the doctors, not to the police, not to anyone as far as I know. She moved out of the house within 2 weeks. According to Dominguez, who followed up because the call bothered him too, she never returned. She left furniture behind, dishes in the sink, clothes in the closet. She just left. I should have let it go. But I couldn't. A few weeks later, during a slow shift, I pulled the records for that address. The house had 2 previous 911 calls in the past 5 years. Both at night. Both from different residents. Both reporting a figure standing at the tree line. Neither caller lived there anymore either. I printed those records. I stared at them for a long time. Then I put them through the shredder. I didn't want them in the building. I didn't want them near me. I never drove past that house. I never looked up who lives there now. I never told this story to anyone until tonight. Some things are better left at a distance. Especially things that stand at the edge of the trees and wait. This one blew my mind. Company said no personal phone calls, so I stopped answering when clients called my cell. I still remember the morning the email came through. It was a Tuesday, because of course it was a Tuesday. Nothing good ever happens on a Tuesday. I was sitting at my desk, coffee still too hot to drink, scrolling through my inbox when I saw the subject line from HR. Updated workplace device policy, effective immediately. I clicked it open and read it twice, just to make sure I was understanding correctly. No personal devices on the work floor. No personal phone calls during work hours. All phones must be stored in designated lockers upon arrival. Any employee found with a personal device on the floor would receive a formal write-up. I looked up from my screen and caught the eye of my coworker Danielle, who sat across from me. She had clearly just read the same email. Her face said everything. Are they serious? She mouthed. I nodded slowly. The thing is, the policy itself wasn't crazy. I get it. Companies don't want employees scrolling TikTok for 6 hours. That's fair. But here's what management apparently failed to consider even for a single second before drafting this policy. Half of our client communication ran through our personal cell phones. Not some of it. Not a little bit. Half. The company had never provided work phones. There was no company cell plan. No stipend. Nothing. For 3 years, 3 full years, every client-facing employee in that office had been using their own devices, their own data plans, and their own personal phone numbers to keep our accounts running. We did it because when we first started, the office phone system was a joke. One shared line with a hold queue that could make a client wait 20 minutes. So somebody, probably Danielle honestly, started giving out her cell number to a difficult client, and the rest of us followed. It just became how things worked. Our clients had our personal numbers saved in their contacts. They texted us directly. Hey, quick question about the invoice. Can you send over the updated proposal? Running late to our 2 p.m., push it to 2:30? Simple stuff that kept everything moving smoothly. They called us on evenings. They called us on weekends. One of my clients, Gerald, once called me at 9:30 on a Sunday night because he had a board presentation Monday morning and needed a specific number from a report. I picked up. I found the number. I sent it to him. And you know what? Gerald renewed his contract for another 2 years after that. We did all of this because we were dedicated employees who actually cared about our accounts. Nobody told us to. Nobody compensated us for it. We just did it because it made us good at our jobs. So when the no phone policy hit, I did exactly what they asked. To the letter. That first Monday morning, I walked in, opened my locker, placed my phone inside, and shut the little metal door. It felt strange, like leaving a limb behind. I watched everyone else do the same thing. A quiet procession of obedient employees surrendering the one tool that had been holding the whole operation together. "This is going to be interesting," said Marcus from the next locker over. He had this grim half-smile on his face, the kind you make when you already know how the story ends. And when clients called my personal number, the only number they had ever had for me, it went straight to voicemail. A voicemail I wouldn't hear until I clocked out and opened my locker at 5:30. For the first week, nothing seemed different on the surface. Phones buzzed silently in locked metal boxes. We sat at our desks and answered emails. Management probably walked around feeling proud of their clean, distraction-free workplace. I imagine someone even patted themselves on the back. Then the complaints started rolling in. It started as a trickle. A client here or there sending a slightly annoyed email. Tried calling you, went to voicemail. "Hey, haven't heard back from you. Everything okay?" We'd respond through email, but it wasn't the same. The quick back and forth that used to happen over text in 30 seconds now took 3 or 4 email exchanges over the course of a day. By the middle of the second week, the trickle had become a flood. Clients couldn't reach their account managers. Emails went unanswered for hours because we had been handling most quick questions by text, and now those questions were clogging up inboxes alongside everything else. Response times went from minutes to days because anything urgent now had to go through the shared office phone, the same ancient system with the same hold queue that had driven us to use personal phones in the first place. I actually watched a client sit on hold for 17 minutes once. I could hear the tinny hold music bleeding out of the receiver from across the room. By week 2, we had lost 3 accounts. Not small ones either. I remember Danielle coming back from a call on the office phone, sitting down at her desk, and just staring at her screen for a full minute. "Henderson Group?" I asked. She nodded. "Gone. Signed with a competitor yesterday. Said they couldn't get anyone to return a call." By week 3, it got worse. A major client, one of our top 5, the kind of account that keeps the lights on, threatened to leave. Their VP called the office main line, actually got through for once, and told our director in very clear terms that if communication didn't improve immediately, they would be taking their business elsewhere. I wasn't in the room for that call, but I saw our director's face afterward. He looked like he had aged 5 years in 15 minutes. Management called an emergency meeting the next morning. All hands. The conference room was packed. Our director stood at the front with his arms crossed, and the head of HR sat beside him with a laptop open, probably ready to take notes. "We need to understand why client communication has collapsed," our director said. His voice was calm but tight, like a rubber band stretched just a little too far. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Marcus spoke up. "We've been using our personal phones to manage client relationships for 3 years. Our own phones, our own plans, our own money. The clients only have our personal numbers. When you told us to lock the phones up, you cut the only line of communication they had to us." There was a pause. I watched it land on our director's face, this slow, dawning realization. Danielle added, "We weren't just scrolling social media. We were running your client accounts from our back pockets. For free. You could have heard a pin drop. HR typed something." The director pinched the bridge of his nose. The meeting ended shortly after that, with a vague promise that they would look into solutions. Within a month, the company issued work phones to every client-facing employee. Brand new devices with a company plan, a company number, and a company email synced right to it. They also, and this is the part that still makes me smile, reimbursed us retroactively for 3 years of personal phone use for business purposes. The total reimbursement came out to about $800 per employee. Not a fortune, but it was an acknowledgement. A quiet admission that they had been benefiting from our personal resources without ever asking or paying for the privilege. The no phone policy remained in effect. Personal devices still go in the lockers every morning. But now we have work phones. Proper ones. With proper numbers that clients can actually reach us on. Which is what we should have had from the very start. Next up, AITA for refusing to marry my fiancée after she banned my 15-year-old son from our wedding? I am a 38-year-old father. My son Tyler is 15. His mother and I divorced when he was 7, and Tyler has been the center of my world ever since. Every other weekend became every weekend, then full custody when his mom moved out of state. I coached his little league team. I learned how to French braid his sister's hair. He doesn't have a sister, but I would have learned that too. The point is, everything I have done for the last 8 years has been built around that kid. I started dating my fiancée Rebecca 2 years ago. We met at a friend's barbecue. She showed up late, wearing a sundress and carrying a bottle of wine that cost more than my entire outfit. She laughed at my terrible jokes. She asked me real questions about my life and actually listened to the answers. Things moved fast, but it never felt rushed. It felt like finding something I didn't know I had been missing. She was smart, genuinely funny, and most importantly, she seemed to like Tyler. She would ask him about school. She remembered the names of his friends. One night the three of us were watching a movie and Tyler fell asleep on the couch between us, and she looked over at me and whispered, "This is nice." I thought I had found it. The whole package. We got engaged after a year. Tyler was the first person I told. His face lit up in a way I will never forget. He hugged me, and then he pulled back and said, "Does this mean I get to wear a suit?" I laughed so hard my eyes watered. That was the happiest I had been in a long time. Then wedding planning started, and Rebecca revealed a side of herself I had never seen. It began small. She was stressed about seating charts and vendor deposits, which I understood. But one evening we were sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open to a wedding planning spreadsheet, and she brought up the guest list. She wanted a child-free wedding. I nodded. I understood that in principle. No toddlers running around knocking over centerpieces. No babies crying during vows. Fine. Reasonable, even. But when I said Tyler would obviously still attend, he is 15, not 5, she looked at me with this expression I had never seen before. Flat. Resolved. The rule is no children, she said. Period. I set my coffee down slowly. Rebecca, he's my son. I know who he is. But if we make exceptions, people will ask why their kids couldn't come. It has to be consistent. I stared at her. He's not an exception. He's the groom's son. He's going to be your stepson. This is his family too. She looked away and started scrolling through her spreadsheet like the conversation was over. It was not over. I explained, as calmly as I could, that excluding Tyler from our wedding was not just logistically awkward, it was cruel. He was excited about it. He had already asked if he could give a toast. He had been practicing in his bedroom. I heard him through the door one night, talking to himself in the mirror, and my chest ached with how much I loved that kid. That is when Rebecca said something that I still hear when I close my eyes at night. Having Tyler there would remind guests of your previous marriage, she said, not even looking up from her laptop. I want the day to feel like a fresh start. He's a symbol of your old life, and I don't want that energy at my wedding. The kitchen went very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear a car passing on the street outside. I remember the specific shade of light coming through the window because everything slowed down in that moment. My son was not a symbol. He was a human being. A 15-year-old kid who had done nothing wrong except exist. A kid who had been excited to welcome this woman into our family. A kid who was upstairs right now, probably still practicing that toast. I did not yell. I wanted to, but I didn't. I pushed my chair back and stood up. I'm going to give you a week to reconsider what you just said, I told her. My voice was steady but my hands were shaking. I need you to understand, this is a deal breaker. Not a negotiation point. A deal breaker. She crossed her arms. So you're choosing your son over me. You're asking me to choose, I said. And you should be very careful about doing that, because you will not like the answer. She did not reconsider. Over the next 7 days, I waited for a phone call, a text, something. What I got instead was a voicemail on day 5 where she said I was being dramatic and that Tyler would understand. She said plenty of blended families navigate things like this. She said I was making it bigger than it needed to be. I sat in my truck in the driveway and listened to that voicemail twice. Then I called her back and told her the wedding was off. The fallout was massive. Her mother called me heartless. Her sister sent me a 4-paragraph text message calling me selfish and saying I had wasted 2 years of Rebecca's life. Some of my own friends said I overreacted and that I could have compromised. Maybe Tyler could attend the reception but not the ceremony. One buddy told me over beers that I was going to end up alone if I kept putting my kid ahead of every relationship. But I sat with it. I asked myself the only question that mattered. What kind of message would that send to my son? That he is welcome at some parts of my life but not all of them? That his father's new wife sees him as baggage? That when push comes to shove, Dad will negotiate away his place at the table to keep the peace? No, absolutely not. Tyler does not know the real reason the wedding was cancelled. I told him Rebecca and I wanted different things, which is true. He was quiet for a minute, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. The same table where Rebecca had called him a symbol. Then he looked up at me and said, "I'm sorry, Dad. Are you okay?" I almost lost it right there. I had to look at the ceiling and blink a few times before I could answer. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "I'm okay." He got up and hugged me. He is almost as tall as me now. That kid has more emotional maturity than most adults I know. More than Rebecca. More than half the people who called me to say I was wrong. Some nights I wonder if I made a mistake. If I threw away something good over one issue. But then I think about Tyler standing in front of his bedroom mirror, practicing a toast for a wedding he wasn't going to be allowed to attend, and I know. I do not regret my decision. I would make it again every single time. Alright, next story. Bride demanded I photograph her wedding for free, then wanted to charge me for exposure. I am a wedding photographer. I have been doing this for 10 years now, and in that decade I have seen just about everything: bridezillas, drunk groomsmen fistfights, a ring bearer who threw up on the flower girl mid-ceremony. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what landed in my inbox last October. My rates are competitive and clearly listed on my website. I am not the cheapest option out there, but I am not luxury tier either. I sit comfortably in the middle, and I deliver consistently beautiful work. My portfolio speaks for itself. Over 200 weddings. Exposed film, digital, candid, posed. I do it all, and I do it well. So when I got an inquiry from a bride to be named, well, let us call her Jessica, I was genuinely excited. She sent me this long, glowing email about how she had spent weeks looking at photographers and mine was the only portfolio that made her cry. She said she could already picture me capturing her first dance, that my style was exactly what she had dreamed of since she was a little girl. The whole thing was dripping with flattery, and I will be honest, it felt good to read. I thanked her warmly and sent over my pricing sheet. Standard package, premium package, a la carte options. Clear, professional, no surprises. I even included a note saying I would be happy to customize something if none of the packages were quite right for her. What came back was the most audacious message I have ever received in a decade of working with clients. She opened by saying she absolutely loved my work and could not imagine anyone else shooting her big day. Then came the pivot. She said she could not pay for photography, not that she could not afford my rates specifically, but that she could not pay at all. Zero. Nothing. However, she was generously offering me the opportunity to shoot her wedding for free. Why? Because her wedding was going to be attended by 300 influential people who would see my work firsthand. She said, and I quote, "This would be amazing exposure for your business. You honestly can't buy this kind of marketing." I sat there staring at my screen for a solid minute. I read it twice to make sure I was not misunderstanding something. Nope. She wanted a full day of professional photography, 10 to 12 hours of shooting, weeks of editing, hundreds of retouched images, for the price of absolutely nothing, because some people at her wedding might theoretically think about hiring me someday. I took a breath. I reminded myself to be professional. I typed out a polite response explaining that while I appreciated her kind words about my portfolio, I have shot over 200 weddings and my business is well established. I do not work for exposure. I wished her the very best in finding a photographer within her budget, and I genuinely meant it. Not everyone can afford a professional photographer, and there is no shame in that. I hit send and figured that was the end of the conversation. A polite decline, a gracious goodbye. Done. It was not done. Her reply came in less than 20 minutes, and I swear my jaw physically dropped when I read it. She had a counter-proposal. Since I would be, in her words, directly benefiting from the incredible exposure of photographing her wedding, she thought it was only fair that I pay a venue access fee. $500. She said other vendors were already paying for the privilege of being associated with her event, and she was offering me the same exclusive opportunity. Let me make sure you are following this. She wanted me to work an entire wedding day for free, and she wanted me to pay her $500 for the honor of doing so. I actually laughed out loud. Like, a real laugh, not a polite chuckle. My wife came in from the other room and asked what was so funny. I turned my laptop toward her and watched her face go through about 4 different expressions in 10 seconds: confusion, disbelief, amusement, and then a kind of impressed horror at the sheer audacity of it all. I thought Jessica had to be joking. Some kind of test, maybe, or a dare from her bridesmaids. But then a follow-up message arrived, completely earnest, explaining that her wedding was going to be featured across multiple social media platforms, and that the $500 was essentially an advertising investment that would pay for itself 10 times over. She even included a breakdown. She estimated I would gain, at minimum 50 new clients, from the exposure, which she calculated at a value of over $75,000. $75,000. From people seeing photos at a wedding. Photos that I would have taken for free. After paying her to let me take them, I did not respond to her directly. Instead, I did something I almost never do. I screenshotted the entire conversation, carefully censored her name and any identifying details, and posted it to a private photography industry group I have been a member of for years. I added a brief caption. Just when you think you've seen it all. Within 24 hours, that post had been shared over 3,000 times. My phone would not stop buzzing. Photographers from all over the country were commenting, tagging their colleagues, sharing their own horror stories. But here is where it got really interesting. Several other wedding vendors started coming forward in the comments and in my DMs, saying she had made the exact same pitch to them. Florists, DJs, caterers, a videographer, even a makeup artist. Every single one of them had been asked to either work for free or pay for the privilege of being part of her wedding. One florist told me Jessica had asked for $6,000 worth of arrangements in exchange for a shoutout on Instagram. The florist had 14 followers. Jessica had about 200. The whole thing became this mini legend in our local vendor community. People were talking about it for weeks. Someone even made a meme out of one of the screenshots, which I cannot describe here, but trust me, it was perfect. As for Jessica's wedding, it happened. I know because a few of the vendors who had turned her down were keeping tabs, mostly out of morbid curiosity. From what I heard, she did not end up hiring a single professional vendor at full price. Her wedding was photographed by her cousin with an iPhone. The photos surfaced on social media eventually, and they were exactly what you would expect. Blurry, poorly lit, half of them at weird angles with someone's thumb in the corner. The cake was slightly lopsided in every shot. The first dance looked like it was filmed during an earthquake. There was one photo of the rings that was actually taken of the wrong hand. I do not say this to be cruel. I genuinely hope she had a beautiful day and that her marriage is happy. But I learned a long time ago a lesson that every freelancer eventually has to learn the hard way, and it is this: exposure does not pay rent. It does not cover my equipment insurance. It does not pay my editor. And charging someone $500 to work for you for free is not a business model. It is delusion. Okay, moving on. A mother demanded I sell her son my rare Pokémon card for $5. It was worth $800. I collect rare Pokémon cards. Not as a full-time thing. It started as a hobby when I was 7 years old, tearing open booster packs at the kitchen table with my older brother, both of us hoping for that one holographic pull that would make the other kid on the bus jealous. Somehow, 20+ years later, that childhood obsession turned into something genuinely valuable. I have binders. I have graded slabs. Some of my cards are worth hundreds. A few are worth thousands. My wife calls it my cardboard retirement fund, and honestly, she is not entirely wrong. Last month, I was sitting in a coffee shop with two friends, Marcus and Dave, guys I have known since college. We try to meet up every few weeks, talk about life, complain about work, the usual. But that day I had something to show them. I had just acquired a first edition holographic card in near mint condition, professionally graded PSA 9, worth approximately $800. I had been hunting for this specific card for over a year, and when it finally popped up at a price I could justify, I pulled the trigger immediately. I slid the protective case across the table like I was presenting evidence in a courtroom. Marcus picked it up and tilted it under the warm overhead light, watching the holographic foil shift from purple to gold. "Dude," he said quietly. Dave leaned in and whistled through his teeth. $800 in a plastic box. That is insane. I was handling it like it was made of glass. Because, financially speaking, it kind of was. I had the case resting on a microfiber cloth I keep in my bag for exactly this purpose. I know that sounds excessive. I do not care. That is when I noticed the kid. A boy who looked about 8 years old was sitting at the next table with his mother. He had a juice box and a muffin in front of him, but his attention was entirely locked on the card in Marcus's hand. His eyes went wide. That specific kind of wide that only happens when a child sees something that hits them right in the center of their obsession. I recognized that look because I had made that exact face 1,000 times as a kid. He slid off his chair and walked over, hesitating for just a second before he spoke. "Excuse me," he said, his voice a little shaky with excitement. Is that a real one?" I smiled. "Yeah, buddy. You want to see it?" He nodded so fast I thought his head might come off. I held the case at his eye level so he could get a good look. He leaned in close, his breath fogging the plastic slightly, and pointed at the holographic shine with one small finger. "Look at that," he whispered, almost to himself. He started telling me the stats, the evolution chain, which games it appeared in. This kid knew his stuff. Sweet kid. Good manners. The kind of child who says, "Excuse me," before interrupting a stranger's conversation, which already puts him ahead of most adults I know. Then his mother came over. She had that specific walk, the purposeful, slightly annoyed stride of someone who has already decided how the next 60 seconds are going to go. She put a hand on her son's shoulder and looked at the card, then at me. "How much did that cost?" she asked. "It is worth about $800, I said. She laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A real laugh, the kind that comes with a head tilt and a hand wave, like I had just told her the earth was flat. "There is no way a Pokémon card is worth that much," she said. "You are exaggerating." Marcus and Dave exchanged a glance. I saw Dave quietly slide his coffee closer to himself, like he was preparing for turbulence. I explained, calmly, that rare graded cards from the first edition set regularly sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars. That this particular market has been well documented. That auction houses have sold individual cards for 6 figures. She was not interested in the education. Her eyes glazed over about 4 words in, and I could tell she had already moved on to her next angle. "Well," she said, smiling down at her son, "he really wants it. I will give you $5 for it." I blinked. "I appreciate the offer, but I am going to have to decline." "10, she said, like we were haggling over a used lamp at a garage sale. "It is really not for sale." 20. She reached into her purse and pulled out a bill, holding it toward me. I am being very generous here. I took a slow breath. I could feel Marcus staring at the side of my head. "Ma'am, this card is worth $800. I am not going to sell it for 20. Something shifted in her face. The friendly negotiation act dropped like a mask hitting the floor, and what was underneath was cold and sharp. She straightened up, crossed her arms, and changed tactics completely. "It is a piece of cardboard," she said, loud enough that the couple 2 tables over looked up from their laptops. "You should be ashamed of yourself, valuing a toy over a child's happiness. My son has been getting straight A's. He deserves something nice. And you are sitting here hoarding children's toys like some kind of—" She gestured vaguely at me, as if the rest of the insult was too obvious to finish. I felt my jaw tighten. There is something uniquely infuriating about being publicly shamed by a stranger who is factually, completely, embarrassingly wrong. I wanted to say a lot of things. I wanted to ask her if she walks into jewelry stores and demands diamond rings for $20 because they are just rocks. I wanted to ask her if she tells artists their paintings are worthless because they are just canvas and paint. But the kid was standing right there. And he was looking up at his mom with an expression I recognized, the slow, dawning horror of a child realizing their parent is making a scene. So I kept my voice even. "The kind of adult who understands that Pokémon cards from 1999 are not toys," I said. "They are investments." I picked up the case, wrapped it carefully in the microfiber cloth, and placed it back in my bag. I zipped it shut. She stared at me for a long moment, her mouth pressed into a thin line. Then she turned to her son and said, loudly enough for the entire coffee shop to hear, "Come on, sweetie. The mean man will not share." The boy, and I will never forget this, tugged gently on her sleeve and said, "It is okay, Mom. It is his card. 8 years old. More emotional intelligence than the woman who raised him. I have no idea how that happens, but I was genuinely impressed." She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the door, narrating her exit to anyone within earshot. "The world is full of selfish people," she announced to the coffee shop at large, as if she were delivering a TED Talk on human greed. The door swung shut behind them. The bell above it jingled cheerfully, completely unaware of the drama. For about 3 seconds, the entire shop was silent. Then the barista, a girl with blue hair and a nose ring who had clearly witnessed the whole thing from behind the espresso machine, caught my eye and mouthed, "I am so sorry." Marcus exhaled like he had been holding his breath for 2 minutes. "What just happened?" Dave shook his head slowly and said, "I need a drink. And I do not mean coffee. I bought a second coffee that afternoon. Left a big tip. The barista deserved it for the sympathetic eye contact alone. The card is still in my collection. Still in its PSA 9 case. Still worth $800. Still not for sale. Especially not for $20 and a guilt trip from a stranger in a coffee shop."